fully mic'd up here. Grief. Trust me with your company, but don't trust me to put a mic on. There we are.
Which one are you?
This does not look like... this one is. So I thought it would be really cool. I thought I'm going to stand in the middle, but like it's an easier angle from here. So, hello everyone. My name's Ray Dolben. I am a lawyer. I own my company called Mud Up. We set up 7 years ago. And I'm going to talk you through the legal elements of an acquisition. I am going to apologise because a couple of you are my clients in here. And so this is going to be real boring. Right. Did I just press the down button, did we say? Or the up?
Oh, it's in Charlie's, isn't it?
I love technology.
Hold
on. Hey, right, okay, so, give that back. Right, so basically a quick overview of what I'm going to really discuss within the next sort of 11 minutes, as I've timed it quite a few times. We're going to have a look at heads of terms, we're going to look at the legal due diligence, we're going to have a look at drafting and negotiating the purchase agreement, and my favourite bits, exchange and completion. Okay, so first part of the deal, and again, this is where normally clients will come to me once they've got a heads of terms already signed. However, we can sometimes jump in prior to heads of terms to help negotiate them if they're going a little bit awry. They're also known as a letter of intent or a memorandum of understanding, but if you call it a memorandum of understanding, I'm going to assume you're born in the 1800s. So the key purpose of your heads of terms, they're going to outline the main structure of the deal. They're going to help to facilitate negotiations and have those conversations. And for me, as the lawyer, it is my jumping off point. So once I get them signed, normally when I'm drafting an FPA or an APA, I'll have them right next to me. I'll go, yep, we've got the purchase structure in there, we've got that in there, cracking, wonderful. So typical contents will be the purchase price and the structure. So that'll include things like your deferred payments, it'll include things like your earnouts and security. It'll also be very clear as to whether or not we're acquiring assets or whether we're acquiring shares. And the way I sort of help people to understand this is, imagine you've got a dead cow in a field. If you're buying the shares, you're buying the whole cow. If you're buying the assets, you're just going to go off and cut the good bits off and leave the skin and the bones for someone else to deal with. Also, it'll contain some key sort of terms and conditions in there. So we'll have like what due diligence is going to be done, and if we need any approvals or anything like that. It'll also contain things such as your confidentiality clauses, exclusivity, and costs. These clauses are generally legally binding. The reason why the sort of deal structure isn't legally binding is because when we do due diligence, the price may change and we may have to be a little bit more flexible with things as they come up. And so normally you'll see subject to contract, subject to satisfactory return of due diligence, and should be present. Okay, so oh, that wasn't nice. Sorry about that, guys. So first part is legal due diligence. For anyone who's worked with me before, this normally takes the form of a questionnaire, which if we're working on buy side, we will send a questionnaire with about 120 questions on it over to the other side's solicitors, or if we're on the sell side, they'll send it to us and we will populate a data room and we'll go through it. On the sell side, I always sort of say it's really important to go through what the seller is putting into a data room, because you don't want to be on the back foot. If they come back with questions, you're going, oh, I'm just going to have to go and check that. It's quite awkward. We look at the contracts and the liabilities. So we look at the contracts that the company's working with. We're looking at the material contracts. We look at employment and pensions. We look at intellectual property. We look at litigation and regulatory compliance. And again, the tax and the financial bit, not really my area. Yeah, that's why you want to have a really good accountant like Claire to go through that. But other things that are quite important, we'll check the London Gazette to make sure that there's no insolvency. We'll check Companies House to make sure that what you're submitting is reflects the same things. We check, again, things like Google searches. We check out social media, we check out reviews as well. Just if you see a company that, legally it's absolutely sound, but when you go on Google and you see 150 one-star reviews saying how terrible it is, again, you flag it up to the client and go, actually, you know what? Legally it checks out, they've got great contracts, they're really gorgeous, but all of these reviews would suggest that it has some reputational damage which could have problems later on. The end result of your legal due diligence, you will get a due diligence report from me, and it will basically say, this is good, that's okay, that's terrible. Normally we'll say either the deal is okay to go ahead, or we will say, perhaps consider stepping away at this point because things are quite bad in this company and we can come up with an action plan to correct it, but at this point, my advice would be to back away. I will say at the point of doing the due diligence is it's a lot easier to step out of a deal during the due diligence process than it is to try and do a warranty claim after. After you sign the contract, things get a lot more difficult. So when we're drafting the purchase agreement, there are two types. It is either a share purchase or an asset purchase. If you're buying from a sole trader, it will be an asset purchase. Or if you're buying from a partnership, it's an asset purchase. You can only purchase the shares of a limited company. So I'm getting a lot of direct eye contact from Claire, so I'm like, oh, have I said something wrong? So again, the key clauses that we're going to be having in there, we're going to have the purchase price and how the price is structured. Generally, when we're looking at an SPA, everything in the first clause 1 is generally always our definition, so how we're going to use it as a bit of a glossary. Clause 2, really down to clause 5, is pretty much how the money's being dealt with. After clause 5, we'll be sort of looking at where the warranties and representations go, and your indemnities, along with sort of your limitations on liability. So the way we read a warranty, warranties will generally, you'll have a nice little clause in your purchase agreement that'll say, so far as the seller is aware, means that the seller is basically done a bit of search for them. And then we'll have a whole schedule dedicated to warranties. The way you read a warranty is it's not an obligation, it is just a statement about the company. Okay, so it'll be something like, the company owns the assets that are being sold, and it has the title to do so, or whatever it may be, or the contracts are all valid and subsisting. But again, we don't read it as an obligation, we read it as just a statement of fact about the company. And generally speaking, when we look at doing a claim, if something's gone wrong, if there was a claim to come on a breach of warranty, that statement turns out to be untrue. So next we have indemnities. Now an indemnity is if we identify something in the due diligence process, we can normally sort of go, oh, if this looks like an identified risk, if this does go wrong, the seller is going to pay us an amount for that to cover that risk. Again, we have conditions precedent, so this is going to come up a little bit after, because it's to do with exchange and completion. And you'll have restrictive covenants in there, so things like the seller's not going to immediately set up a company next door tomorrow. Normally we sort of go with, when it comes to restrictive clauses, I sort of have this conversation a lot. They can either be very broad and quite short in time period, or they can be really focused and a little bit longer. Generally speaking, the courts and the government absolutely hate restrictive clauses. They see them as a restriction on trade and they're not favourably seen. So generally speaking, we sort of professionally aim to go for about 2 years on restrictive clauses. And if you have got conditions precedent, there may be some termination clauses. Throughout the SPA or the APA, drafting and negotiating that, we are basically trying to balance the risk between the buyer and seller. And a good set of lawyers on either side will be trying to balance, because ultimately, I always sort of say this to a few clients, but I work in an area of law that it isn't contentious. I can walk away with both the buyer and seller feeling like they've won if I do my job right. If the other side's lawyer has done their job right, we will have two clients very happy at the end. There is the risk if you have a bad lawyer on the other side that you probably wouldn't be wanting to talk to the other party. So there are some ancillary documents to go along with your purchase. These are sort of they are important, they are definitely important, but they are not covered in the main agreement. So from a sell side perspective, and again from a buy side perspective, we have a disclosure letter. So the disclosure letter basically says, and again going back to the SPA, if there's in the warranty, the disclosure letter will say, well, we've given you this warranty, but this is slightly incorrect, or here is a bit more context to something that might not be factually correct. The disclosure letter is highly important, and don't sort of skip over it. You'll have board resolutions from the buyer and seller if they're both corporate entities. You'll have employment agreements for key members of staff who are staying, either that or consultancy agreements. You'll hear that sometimes we throw out a consultancy agreement if, say, one of the directors is doing a handover period, or one of the shareholders is staying on for a little bit longer. We'll normally do it as a consultancy agreement. The assignment of IP generally, again, comes with more of the APA side of things on an asset purchase, but we do try and sometimes work that into the APA as well, so it's not a complete form. You do stock transfer forms and the accompanying letter to HMRC, and your transfer formalities. Transfer formalities basically are login details for your email accounts, your Facebook accounts, the website accounts, basically everything. But we have it in a nice little form, and it keeps everything nice. And then we have security documents if they're applicable, so things like your legal charge over the shares. You can have like a debenture or so on and so forth. Sometimes a personal guarantee. I know if you've been part of a one of the business buying groups, they also never sign up to a personal guarantee, trust me. Everyone, whenever it gets to crunch time, personal guarantees are sometimes used. But yeah, next we have exchange and completion. So exchange and completion are separate parts to complete on a transaction or an acquisition. So exchange is where it's the legal commitment happening. It is the actual signing of the agreement. And that is where the deal is legally bound to complete. Completion is where the funds are transferred over and the transaction is actually executed, or as I like to put it, putting the date on the SPA and the APA. So these can generally happen together and on the same day. Sometimes we do a split exchange and completion. If we are doing a split exchange and completion, it's normally because, let's say, there's a set contract that is due to be renewed and it's massively material to the business. If the seller's saying, oh, well, this is going to come to fruition on, let's say, the 1st of June, well, then we'll go, well, we will complete. We'll exchange on the 15th of May, but we'll complete on the 2nd of June once that contract has been signed by the company and we know that we've got them there. Again, this would be considered a condition precedent, and we, work from there. So again, key steps at completion, we will be transferring funds, delivering the documents, doing filings on company's house, and doing public announcements, and again, handovers of control. Yeah, okay. Cool. So, 1 second, not quite done yet. Basically, this is a bit of a same thing. Sometimes, not always, we do try to exclude VAT on asset purchases. However, HMRC, those lovely people, they do sometimes try to say that VAT was required on that purchase, so be aware of that. And again, just sort of things that people forget, like if the business is coming with cars, get the car keys, and also just make sure that you notify any third parties or regulators. So if you're buying an accountancy practice, you may need to get in touch with the ICAW. Key summaries and takeaways. Well, okay, legal advice is critical, guys. I'm not forwarding my own sales here, but yes, well-drafted documents do help to reduce risk. And again, thorough due diligence can sort of help prevent any future disputes. And again, clear planning can ensure a more smooth transition. I know sort of from working with, I'm working on Charlie's, with Charlie's clients. We started doing the legwork months ago. So he came to me and said, I'm interested in working with you. And again, as the seller, I was like, right, okay, well, here's the due diligence questionnaire that I'd expect to see from the other side. Let's get preparing. And we signed heads of terms last week. The data room got opened this afternoon. It can be moving quick if you do the legwork. Thank you for all your attention.
Any questions?
Oh, that's a lot.
So for example, our clients, whenever we generate a positive response, it's normally very early days.
Yeah.
Now, how early in the process would you recommend somebody approach you and say, we need some potential legal advice?
Generally speaking, I would always sort of say once you get to heads of terms, that's generally when I get instructed. But I work on a fixed fee, so if someone says, "Oh, can you help us with I'm just like, yeah, of course, we'll help you negotiate this. It could be sort of whenever they feel comfortable. I always sort of think though that in the early stages, conversations between the buyer and seller and sort of encouraging good positive communication is sometimes the best thing for deals. Like when lawyers get involved and when it's back and forth between the lawyers, it can always sort of seem a little bit aggressive. So whenever a client will come to me, if they go, "Oh, Ray, we're having a bit of a problem with the heads of terms," I'll sort of like, well, I'm happy to advise from this side, but before I sort of say anything to anyone else, have the conversations with them, because building that relationship between the buyer and the seller is absolutely fundamental, especially if you have a deferred element, because you're about to jump into bed with that person. Completion is not the end. Completion is very much, for me, it's where I get to step away and just thanks for the money, guys. But for you guys, you could be in bed with someone for 3 or 5 years, and that is a long time. So that relationship needs to be really strong at that point.
I know this will be hard to answer, but is there an average timescale it takes from heads of terms to exchange? Does your industry track UK averages or anything like that?
I don't, but I'm sure there's someone who will. Charlie would. So the quickest I've ever done a deal was 4 days from heads of terms being signed to completion. The longest, 13 months, Charlie, was it? Yeah, it's 13 months. Yeah. I always say, how long is a piece of string? It depends if you get good lawyers on either side. So with Vamos, whenever Charlie came to me and said, "Ray, I'm thinking of starting Vamos," I was like, yes, because you can turn you into a broker that I'm not going to completely hate. This is going to be good. It's going to be really good. So we sort of discussed a panel. I said, look, I've worked with these solicitors. and they are absolutely fantastic to work with. They're all middle-minded. Again, we see it as a collaboration rather than trying to point score with our clients. On those deals, things move real quick because we're able to sort of pick up the phone and have a conversation and go, right, this is what we seem to be struggling on. Can we work something in the middle? And we know that the advice they're receiving is going to be middle-minded rather than aggressive and point scoring. But it's when we get into a point scoring territory, that's when it takes forever and a day. Generally speaking, though, the longest thing that's going to take time is finance. So the finance teams take forever, and it's normally because there's a whole lot of mistakes in the accounts. Hence why I asked, can you do management accounts in the middle? Because we've had it where we'll go, in the middle of the due diligence process, we'll go, we need to get a set of management accounts, or we need to get a new set of accounts because there are so many holes in this one. It's like resembling Leodemmer at this point. So there's not really a time frame metric, but depending on if both sides have instructed sort of fairly middle-minded lawyers, then yeah, it can go fairly quick on the legal side, yeah.
When you have a gap between exchange and completion, is there legal penalties of what you put into it if somebody failed to complete in that instance?
So we would normally put in something called a long stop date, which basically says, so I'll go back to my example of, you said there was going to be a contract signed on the 2nd, on the 1st of June. By the 15th of June, that contract has not been signed. This agreement is going to terminate, like releasing everyone from their obligations. If we are doing a split exchange and completion, it adds 2 additional schedules to an APR and SPA. We'll have the interim running of the business and how that is to be ran. We will also have things that are going to require the buyer's consent for them to do certain actions, like you can't take on a credit card, or you can't take on a loan for £50,000, you can't strip the assets out of the company, you can't grant any sort of charges over the business or anything like that. You cannot promise all of your staff a pay rise, loads of stuff like that. It's if that does happen, yeah. It's, I hope that answers your question.
Right. Anyone else?
I heard a bit of a story the other day. This is a buyer that's concluded a deal, and they turned up on the day of close.
Yep.
And they found out the day before that the owner.
So, depending on how they'd done it, that would technically be stealing from the company. So, you could begin to sort of take action against them on that one. Again, it would go against, we have warranties sort of protect that. Normally, the only reason that way you would empty the account, if there is like, if it's on a cash-free, debt-free, so then you would expect to see the accounts empty, not empty, but with working capital and with some amount of like liability for the tax. So like if they know they've got a £50,000 tax bill coming up, they'll go, tax up until completion, here's the money for it. It's your responsibility to pay that. But yeah, if they've illegally drained the company, would immediately go, right, file claim. Let me introduce you to my friend who is a dispute resolution solicitor.
I mean, to be fair to them, they had agreed an appropriate.
So did they not leave the working capital? Was the working capital put into the agreement?
Yes.
Right, okay, so they're in breach of contract.
Absolutely.
Straight away. So I would immediately file claim.
How long would that take
Um,
to recover? Because they
it can-
had to go in and put money in.
it can take a while.
It's minimum. So basically, that money they've now got to replace.
Yeah, the immediate run-in. Again, when you file claim, you look at all the costs that that's costed them as well, so keeping the company going.
There's
yeah.
no way to prevent that happening prior to
You can sort of start preparing the like bank account, so you can sort of start doing mandate changes so that they are active on completion. Or like sort of having like lockbox mechanisms does sometimes help. But again, if you're working with a dishonest seller, a contract is very good for minimising, but it can't stop. I hate saying it, but it can't stop an arsehole if they're going to be an arsehole. Sorry.
Fair enough. I didn't think it could. I just wondered
It's
how it could happen. But yeah, I appreciate that.
But sometimes you can get in touch with the bank and get them to return. Sometimes, not always. There's a few different processes, but again, like sort of get straight in and immediately file a claim. Like I wouldn't wait around.
Okay.
There you go.
Sorry, just to follow up to that one, we had, in a previous group I was working with, had a similar circumstance, and from then forwards, all of our completions were done in person, and bank cards, mobile apps, everything's signed over in person at the time to prevent that from happening. It doesn't change the mandate, and often we've had problems with banks not wanting to change mandate for quite a while.
Yeah.
But you can sit there and stop them accessing the bank, so that when their money is arriving, you simultaneously have control of the business funds. So that, from then forward, we did all of our completions face-to-face.
Thank you for that. No, I appreciate it.
I'm very curious how you're using AI in your business.
Oh, right, okay. So recently, and very recently, I signed up with Practical Law's AI. I still haven't had the training on it, so I draft everything by hand. Honestly, I'm a complete technophobe. I tend the most recent endeavour with AI was I had a client try to write his own warranty using AI, and I was like, we won't be using these. They're not good. So, ship them back and we'll rewrite them the way they should be written. But no, me personally, I'm not using AI too. We've got tools to do it, but I just haven't had the training on it. I haven't really had time. If you ask me in a couple of weeks, I'll be like, yeah, I've had some training, it's great. Game changer, as I keep hearing from everyone who uses it now.
Anyone else? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.